Hi, I'm Sarah and I'm interviewing Jolie today. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Absolutely. So my name is Jolie. I'm here today referred through a friend. So I'm really looking forward to sitting down and chatting and designing something beautiful.
Awesome. So my first question for you is, are you a feminist?
I do consider myself a feminist, and I do call myself a feminist, and I strive to bring that ideology into my life and allow that to sort of influence my life.
Why are you a feminist? Like what was the reason behind identifying yourself?
Absolutely. I had seen that question, and I couldn't really think of an answer to it. To me, it's kind of like, why not? It's sort of something that I've sort of naturally kind of felt connected towards, and when I got to an age where I started researching more and looking into it more, I definitely felt that it was aligned with my personal values. And I mean, at the end of the day, I think in its simplest forms, looking at equality, and specifically in our day and age, equity for folks of all genders, why not? I think that's so important, and I think that that's a natural.
How long you've been a feminist for?
Sure. I think it's hard to say. It's sort of something that I felt always aligned with my thoughts and my values and my feelings, but I think it was around kind of like my preteen years, my early teen years, that I really started researching in terms of the history and the ideology, and really having sort of like a historical context of feminism. So I would say around that time is when I really kind of focused on researching that and allowing that to inform my opinions and my identification as a feminist.
We kind of mentioned it, but what does feminism mean to you, if it's a personal thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think feminism is extremely personal to each person. I think that feminism looks very different when you begin to really explore it, and when you really listen to people, when you, particularly listening to women, speak about their identification as a feminist and their relationship to feminism. I think it is very personal, it is very unique to each person, but at the end of the day, I think what it means to me, or why it's important to me to really sort of always further my knowledge of feminism and the issues related to feminism today, is really so that I can practice that in my own life. I think that feminism is an ideology, but really it's also a practice as well. So the ideology should, inform your practice. It should inform how you live your day-to-day life, and just kind of keeping in mind your ideology and allowing that to inform your experiences. Particularly, I think that we're at a point where we really need to recognize as feminists that historically there have been sort of problematic points in the past, or there have been gaps in the past where certain voices haven't been given a platform, and certain people haven't been given space to really discuss their identification and relationship with feminism, particularly women of color, or women of different ages, women of different socioeconomic backgrounds, women of different abilities. So I think that it's extremely important to keep that conversation going, but also to give more space and more platform to women who are part of those communities, so that we can continue to move forward and continue to strive for greater equity and equality.
I agree. You kind of mentioned how feminism informs your daily practices, and it relates to the other question, like what makes you a feminist?
Absolutely. I think that's such a great question, because I think that there's no one way that someone can be a feminist, and I personally dislike the notion of being a good feminist or a bad feminist. What does that mean? Because feminism means different things to each person. But I think at the end of the day, doing whatever you can to uplift the folks around you, uplift your community, uplift other women, and uplift, again, certain communities that, again, haven't always been focused on, or their experiences have been erased or not given a platform. I think whatever work we can do to uplift that is really important. So whether that's through activism, volunteer work, or even just being, a personal leader within your community or your friend network, someone who people can feel comfortable and safe to go to for mentoring or even just friendship. I think whatever daily activities we can do to just kind of keep that alive within our lives and alive within our communities is really important. And again, that could be anything from as structured as your occupation, your activism, your involvement in volunteer causes, or just being, a good friend and a supportive friend, someone that always tries to educate themselves, and someone who's willing to listen, because I think that is extremely important. There's a lot of, again, historically in feminism, there's been a lot of gaps, and the more work that we can do to close those gaps and make sure we have basically greater insight in all the different discussions is most important. So just being a friend and a leader within your community, I think is a really important thing. Myself, I think certain practices that I've taken have range from all different things. I mentioned before, I'm a bit of a film nerd, so I used to manage a documentary series. So that was really important to me because I think that my two passions came together and I was able to do some really great work with my community doing that. Because I feel that film is a really accessible tool to educate people, and people can feel comfortable discussing the film. That was really important to me because we can show a film and sort of get that education out there, but I think the real work comes in fostering discussion afterward and making sure that people feel safe to be able to discuss their reactions to the film. So we would always have town hall discussions after, or even if it was a small group, just an informal discussion after, making sure people feel comfortable to converse and making sure that everyone's given time and ample time really to converse. So that was something that was really important to me. I do some volunteer work. I've taken a little bit of a break because I was doing school as well as work, but I volunteered with Culturally, so that was a great organization. It's not particularly focused on feminism, but I would allow my feminism to inform my volunteer work there. So that was an excellent opportunity. But again, I think my main day-to-day thing is to try to learn something new every day or speak to someone new every day. So that's something that I try to focus on.
That's awesome. Can I ask you about the documentary series that you managed? What were the documentary about?
Yeah, so we didn't have a set theme, but our focus was on showing documentaries made by independent filmmakers. So that was really important that the documentaries were by independent filmmakers, Canadian, but also international as well. And also we focused on documentaries that sort of represented or gave a lens towards a voice or a narrative that isn't always well represented. So we were looking at documentaries that focused on healthcare, environmentalism, feminist movements in other countries. We're looking at social justice, political issues, socioeconomic issues. It was really a mixed bag of things, but we were really looking at filmmakers from all walks of life, particularly, again, Canadian, but also international as well. So that was a really great opportunity.
What do you want others to know about feminism? In a sense, like maybe they've been misinformed by the stigma, or they literally do not know the definition of the word. So how would you explain?
That's a super good question, and I think that even though feminism, I think, has been talked about for decades upon decades, it's still such a term that's misconstrued. It's obviously been co-opted by certain groups that have, unfortunately, I think, misconstrued the meaning of it. And you got people that assume that feminism is about hating men or what have you. But I think that at the end of the day, I think that's just so ridiculous that it's been so misconstrued. And I think it's important to bring feminism and the definition of feminism back to people who really choose to live with that and allowing them to inform the definition. But I think at its simplest parts, I would tell people who are super unfamiliar with it that really it's just striving for equality between genders, and again, particularly between folks of different races and different socioeconomic classes and different communities. But yeah, it's really looking at equality and recognizing that a lot of societal systems are sort of in a place that does not always benefit everyone. So just looking at that and just striving for equity and then eventually hopefully equality. So I think that's in its simplest form. I'd like people to know that feminism is such a fluid and personal thing. So I may meet someone who identifies as a feminist, and their, their relationship to feminism could be very different from mine. And it's not my place to say whether that's good or bad. That's my responsibility to learn from them and to educate myself based on their experience. At the end of the day, feminism, again, it must be intersectional. If it's not, then I don't think you can really call it feminism. That's my personal opinion. So I think coming from my experience in the world, it's very important to me that I listen, and I really try to take the time to listen to other women who have come from different experiences than I do. And sometimes, again, as we mentioned before, that can be a very uncomfortable thing when you recognize that you may have had certain privileges in ways that you may not have even realized. But the more that we open ourselves up to learning and educating ourselves and really, kind of interrogating ourselves as well too, in a manner of speaking, I think it's a healthy way to bring feminism into your life. But just at the end of the day, recognizing that everyone's relationship with feminism is different, and allowing that to open a discussion rather than close doors.
So true. Yeah. So what do you want others to know about feminists? People take on the label.
Kind of related to the first one, that there's no one size fits all for feminism. There's not one way to be a feminist. There's not one exemplary person who's a feminist. I think that, again, there's certain misconceptions about what a feminist is and what they believe in, or even down to the ridiculous notion of what a feminist looks like. I think that, feminists look many different ways. We believe in different things. We come from many different experiences. So just being open to the idea that there's, for every feminist out there, that's a different definition of feminism, and just being open to that. And at the end of the day, recognizing that the opinions of feminists are valid and they're valuable, and recognizing that and taking time to listen.
Are there any specific feminist causes you care about? If so, what are they?
Absolutely. I think a topical sort of moment right now is, I think people, and particularly white women who identify as feminists, are recognizing that their feminism may have not always been aware of the intersection of many different things with gender, whether it be race or ability or many, many different factors and experiences. So I think right now is a really important time for white women who identify as feminists to educate themselves there and interrogate themselves, and give space to other women to speak and be heard. Mm-hmm. But also coming from a personal background, I think also body positivity and body politics is very, very important to me. And that's sort of what I've been focusing a lot of my energy on lately. So I think that coming from a personal perspective, that's what I'm really looking at right now.
Cool. So I'm going to jump to fashion-related questions.
Cool, I'm excited.
Do you feel that your fashion choices inform your identity or represents your identity?
I think to some extent, yeah, absolutely. It's funny, I think all my friends, and Nina can tell you this as well, see me as being always on one side of the spectrum or the other. I'll come into work being very sort of conservatively dressed or very, toned down, and then when we go out, it's always giant hair, crazy makeup, crazy clothes. I love I love the history of fashion. I love fashion from all different eras, so I love to borrow from that and play with it in a way that, again, is very uniquely me. So I feel like I kind of exist on two sides of the spectrum. I think that how I dress myself in the morning is the culmination of so many different things. It's my experiences with my own body and issues that I have with my own body image, as well as the triumphs that I've had with that. It's informed by my culture and my family's culture. It's informed by the work and the workplace that I've chosen, and that's accessible to me. But then I think when I feel most free to allow my fashion and allow how I dress my body to sort of represent my identity or be informed by my identity is when I'm sort of outside of the spaces of work or family or what have you. It's when you're just going out, having fun, and you can just really experiment and play with what makes you feel good and what makes you feel excited about putting out in the world.
Would you wear something that expresses your feminist identity?
Absolutely. I think that I have. I certainly think that I would. And again, I think how someone dresses their body and how they interact with fashion, again, is so informed by your own personal experiences. And I mentioned it in the previous question too, that I've, had a lot of struggles and a lot of triumphs as well with my own body and my body image as well. So that heavily informs how I dress myself and what I choose when I'm shopping and when I imagine myself wearing certain clothes and going out into the world. That is has such an impact on what I choose to wear. So I think that when I feel the most comfortable, or if I feel comfortable, and I don't want to say empowered because I don't think that's the right word, but it's kind of the only word that's coming to my head right now, to sort of wear clothing that I feel truly speaks to me and speaks to what I feel beautiful in, or what I just think is a beautiful piece of art. It's just such an incredible feeling when you find something like that and you're like, okay, yes, this is mine, and you just adorn yourself with it and you go out and you feel amazing, So I absolutely would wear something that represents my identity. It's hard to say what exactly that would be, but yeah, absolutely I would.
So we're going to create something that represents your feminist identity. What is the first thing you would want to let others know about your feminist identity?
That's such a good question. I think the number one thing and the first thing that I would want, and I don't necessarily know how I'd represent this, but is that beauty is not necessarily one size, and that I truly believe this. I don't want to sound cliche, but I do think that all individuals are incredibly gorgeous in their own way. So I think that that's kind of one of the first things that I think of when it comes to fashion. I want something really bold. I want something really beautiful. I want something really artistic that someone of any size or body type can wear and feel like amazing, and which is hard to say because everyone's body is different, but just something bold, I think.
Okay, so let's try a bold design.
Yes.
So I'm just trying to convey what you just said into like symbols and imagery. We think of something that represents like uniqueness and
I don't know why I think when you said uniqueness and bold, I'm thinking like unicorns for some reason.